Have you ever seen someone ruin their life in just a few seconds? How did they do it? A woman failed her drug test at a courthouse and I watched her run across a parking lot with 2 drug court employees on her heels. She hopped in someone's SUV and shoved the driver out of the vehicle. The drug court employees stood in front of the SUV with their hands on the hood to stop her, and she revved the engine and then knocked them with the car before reversing and driving away over a sidewalk. Who made the biggest mistake though? My vote is for the person who thought they could stop an SUV with their bare hands. I had a friend in university, a student of jazz vocalist, who had an incredibly bright future ahead of her. Midway into her first year freshman year, she was out with some friends in a theater on stage and for fun, they were swinging her or just fooling around. I believe they somehow dropped her or lost grip. She hit her head hard, got a bad concussion, had to drop out of school. She now has chronic head pain and is living back at home. She tried to return back to school, but could barely last through 2 classes, if even, before her pain would get too bad. I've lost touch with her so I'm not entirely sure what she's doing now, but, my gosh, just her life entirely derailed because of that one silly accident. Kid in his teens tried jumping off a leading light at high tide to impress his mates and girlfriend. Hit a concrete wave breaker back first, shattered part of his spine and is now in a permanent vegetative state. I would never want to live in a vegetative state. One of my high school classmates, a kicker on the football team, was at a party at a friend's house on the very last day of school in his senior year. The house was on a lake, and he decided to run off the end of the pier and jump headfirst into the lake. The water was a foot deep. He never walked again. Man, I was at my buddy's lake cabin, we were drinking, some people were in the water so I decided to dive in. Lucky I did a shallower dive, but where I dove it was only 2 feet deep, smoked my head on a rock. It was a glancing blow so I just got a big gash on my forehead and a concussion. Neck hurt a ton for like the next week, but I consider myself so lucky. Unmuted Zoom call. Trash talking a manager. HR posted a thank you X for your years of service email pretty much the next day. This past fall, an attorney I know attended a Zoom meeting with video. You could see someone not entirely out of frame crawl under her desk and spend the duration of the meeting there. It was very obvious by her facial expressions and movements what was going on under the desk. She lost her job, and from what I understand, the guy was not her husband, so her marriage may be lost as well. Had a friend that thought he could jump over a bonfire. He almost made it but fell back into the fire, his arm going into the embers. Ended up with 3rd-degree burns on over a fourth of his body. I think he's doing pretty okay now, but that one dumb decision will affect the rest of his life. Camping trip with friends when we were around 17 yo. One kid hammered in his tent pegs, then just tossed the hammer at someone else's tent for no apparent reason. A girl was in the tent and caught full power of the hammer toss to her mouth. Shattered several teeth in her mouth, which she then choked on. She died choking on her own shattered teeth while alone and bleeding out of her face in a tent, with no idea of what caused her injury. Campsite in the middle of nowhere. It took over an hour for help to come. Kid got arrested and got suspended sentence for involuntary manslaughter. Holy frick, this is probably the most heartbreaking one to me. My mom's best friend dove headfirst into the shallow end of a pool while drunk at one of my birthday parties. She broke her neck and became paralyzed from the neck down. She died a couple years later. I literally did this. My 20-year-old self did that. I'm so glad that paralysis wasn't the outcome. I couldn't move my neck for weeks, had a concussion, and had a gnarly goose egg. I still have back pain. Never did see a doctor BC, I didn't have health insurance. I saw this and got the willies. OMG. I'm so lucky. Tweeted that they had hit a cyclist when driving to work. By the time she had got to work, the company had sacked her for bringing the company into disrepute. Idiot. Waiting outside a club one rainy night, some young lady decided to take one of the cop cars out front for a spin after getting tossed out. She ended up crashing into one of those concrete barricade things blocking the side door. There's a crazy NSFL video going around Twitter where 2 teen girls ruin their lives. They try to carjack an Uber driver and he holds onto the door and they speed off and end up flipping the car and killing him. It was in DC. They got charged with murder. A friend's brother jumped off the balcony of his apartment at his own birthday party. He was aiming for the pool, and he missed. When I was in college there were some dorms that had the balconies close together. I think I read about 3 stories a year about drunk people trying to jump from one to the other and falling to their death. A girl tried to run from a bar to the bar and across the street. She waited for the car to pass and then ran for it, directly in front of the motorcycle following the car that she didn't see. He tried to swerve and laid it down but still caught her with it. Last I heard they both survived, but were likely to have permanent mobility mental faculty issues. 2 lives radically altered because she didn't want to wait another 5 minutes for traffic to clear. In my city most people vs car accidents are caused by jaywalking. I know people like to crap on it for being a stupid law, but it's to help try to prevent things like this from happening. Also, if you must jaywalk you should set a consistent pace. Trying to dodge traffic instead of making yourself predictable enough to let traffic dodge you instead makes it even more dangerous. I didn't see the guy, but one of my roommates had a classmate who became paraplegic after failing to do a random backflip in a McDonald's parking like 2 or 3 years ago. He committed suicide a couple months ago. That's freaking sad. We always see these videos online of people messing up tricks and stunts, but we rarely know what happens after. It makes me wonder if I've seen videos of somebody ruining their own life like this and didn't know it. Growing up I lived across from a large hill. When I was like 14 some older kid decided to try to go down the hill on his skateboard without a helmet. There was a 90-degree turn at the bottom of the hill. His board slid out mid-turn and he hit his head harder than I could imagine. He was unconscious until about 10 minutes after the ambulance pulled up. Ended up having pretty much no memory, was fully paralyzed, and his brain reverted back to the IQ of a 3-year-old. He didn't even know his name or recognize his parents. I always felt bad for him as he was just trying to show off to his friends, who were rooting him on. Although yes, I know it was a horrible decision on his part. Always wear a helmet. A friend, 22 years old with his first motorcycle, flirting with a girl. He offered her a ride but neither wore a helmet. They have an accident. She died and he had it be a traumatic brain injury. No physical problems now, but he's on full disability. Short-term memory is gone. So even if you convince him that something is true, he won't remember it the next day. He'll turn 40 this year. I knew a guy. He and his friends were into that trend of going to really high places and taking pictures of them hanging from them. The guy I knew got to the top of one of those massive crane things and while taking the picture he fell. He died upon impact with the ground, and now whenever I see pictures like that on social media I want to cry and beg these people to stop before they lose their lives. The ultimate evidence that the earth isn't flat is the lack of any videos of some Russian kid hanging off the side. A mate of mine was offered crack by a fairly famous musician that he was obsessed with. He wanted to hang out with him so badly that he did. Got in the car and I didn't see him until the next week. He seemed fine at first, but then over the course of the next few months he deteriorated quickly. Started hanging out with local C kids. Crack turned to M. Lost touch with him for a few years, then ran into him in a park locally and he looked like crap. He hid from me. I found out a few weeks later that he had a kid with another M head and they had a kid taken off them, which sent him off the edge and he completely lost his marbles. Every so often I would run into him in busy places but he would look away and pretend he didn't know me. Then one day he disappeared completely. A family friend who was the coolest, nicest MF you'd ever meet. Had his crap together and life just seemed good for him. One night partying around offered him some H. Fast forward 10 years later and his wife has divorced him, took his kids. He lost everything he possibly owned. Sold all crap he had left to buy more H. Now is a bitter shell of his old self living on the street. He's probably dead by now. TL. DR. Don't try H. H is crazy. Spent some time in jail. Nothing serious, and the guys in 4H would call their friends and tell them to sell their crap for them. Not to pay bail or get a lawyer, but so they had H money when they got out. Super sad. Bartending in Atlanta. Had a group come in that was in town from Minneapolis for a work conference. We got them around, then realized how hammered most of them were and cut off the group. The head honcho was everybody's boss. I believe he owned the company. He was the only one in his right mind because he was leading the conference the next day. Cool guy actually. Anyway, they decided to get a ride to a strip club to keep the party going, and I got them some chips and Quizo to munch on in lieu of drinks. Quizo comes out. The drunkest guy thought it was soup and wanted to test this hypothesis by putting the dang skillet to his lips and burning the crap out of his mouth. It was ugly. Head honcho jokingly said, "I never should have hired your dumb butt," and drunk guy immediately punches him in the teeth. Harder than you'd expect a dude who can barely stand to be able to hit. Head honcho goes to the bathroom with a bloody mouth and a tooth in his hand, and the rest of the group got buddy out of there. So in a matter of seconds this guy turned a fun night into second-degree burns and a trip to unemployment. I would imagine he was hard pressed to find another job in that field. I miss bartending, lol. Friend of mine had an old restored Jeep from like the 70s. Antique plates and everything. Ended up driving on the freeway really fast. Jeep went crazy and flipped. Broke his arm. Now has neurological problems and had to leave his 6-figure job to living at home with his parents. He was engaged and that ended as well after his accident. That's the third Jeep in this thread so far. A friend's kid just got his license, bought a new car but couldn't afford insurance. Hit an electrical infrastructure box, wasn't injured but up for $120,000 and went bankrupt. I had a mate trying to show off his new car. He was heading down our road, half of him out the window, using who knows what to reach the pedals. Later on that day, his car was shown on TV. The first thing I heard was they are still looking for the other half. His funeral was closed casket, and I never looked any further into it. I just hope he passed on quickly. Oh god, that's horrifying. Saw a dude on a motorcycle get hit by a semi. Was hard to realize it was his body on the ground. Seemed unreal. He did not make it sadly. Saw a buddy, my best friend at the time, ride his crotch rocket into the side of an apartment building. We were waiting for a friend to come down. We were goofing off doing burnouts and wheelies in the parking lot. Dumb. He slipped up and whiskey throttled it right into the building. People from 2 apartments over came out to see what happened. He nailed it. Was doing about 40 miles per hour. Totaled his bike. Fricked up his shoulder. Got hooked on pain pills. We intervened. Tried to help him. He robbed a few friends' houses over the years. Burned a lot of bridges. Last I knew he was homeless. Well, I DK about ruining life, but certainly changing it. A woman I worked with was almost entirely covered in disfiguring burn scars because she ran into her burning house to save her child. She didn't even have fingernails left. She showed me a picture of what she looked like before and she was very pretty. Honestly, she rocked it though and was probably one of the coolest people I ever met. One time she and some co-workers went to a strip club, and the stripper was trying to get people in the crowd to flash her, and no one but her did it, ha ha ha. Bet that was a shock. Letting the child die would have fricked her life way harder, imho. When I saw a mate who started smoking crank for the first time, I told him it has accident written all over it, but he did it anyway. Messed with crank for a bit, got myself into a lot of trouble and I was able to eventually stop myself before things went too far. But it chills me to think of what my life would have been if I prolonged my usage. I'm so sorry for your friend. My brother's best friend from middle school grew up to be an absolute failure. He got his girlfriend pregnant and was afraid of his wife finding out, so he killed her. Tried to pretend to be her by sending a few texts, then drove her car to a Walmart and parked in front of a security camera and bought a tarp, duct tape, and cleaning products with her credit card. Sounds like that dude made every mistake in the book. People are so dumb. I mean, it's a good thing, 'cause he's behind bars and all, but frick, poor woman. But from reading your post I first assumed he killed his wife, but rereading, I'm not sure you aren't referring to the pregnant girlfriend. They're equally bad, though, of course. Saw a dude lose his slip for mooring his boat due to lack of payment. Decided to anchor off the shore, against all advice. Soft sea floor, high winds, break wall, etc. Apparently he went to the store and came back to his wooden boat, also his housing, in a million pieces. The guy was an idiot, and I often wonder if it was some Hail Mary attempt at getting his ex back in some fricked up way. Very nearly did so myself. I was working in a hotel in a foreign country and the staff quarters were on like 5th, 7th floors. We were treated terribly and barely paid. And one day I had a breakdown and threw a dinner plate out the window because it was covered in bugs and pigeon droppings, both of which had infested our living quarters after a window broke and the hotel refused to replace it. I immediately realized what I had done and heard loud screaming and commotion outside. About 20 minutes later a large number of cop cars arrive and start searching rooms on the upper floors. I shared a room with several other staff and there were a bunch of drugs in there, so everyone was scared shitless. I immediately go to the lobby and hand myself in to prevent a search. The cops only had a few questions before dropping the issue, but they told me I was in deep crap with my employer. Apparently an executive from the parent company that owned the hotel was on a routine visit and the plane just happened to crash to the ground right next to him as he walked outside. No one was hurt, and I wasn't charged with anything, but I volunteered my resignation with a couple of weeks notice so I could arrange transportation back to my own country as I was on a work visa. It's really incredible I didn't seriously injure anyone or get my life totally ruined, but I was like 18 and I think the hotel was afraid the cops would realize they were employing illegal staff in illegal conditions. We lived in a condemned part of the building complex along with many immigrants without papers. They even asked if I really wanted to quit as they would be short-handed until they could get some people in from abroad. I think you handled your mistake in a very mature way and that leaving was the best decision to take in that scenario. I used to work at Subway. One of our regular customers was this really chill dude who just always looked tired. I found out he worked for a steel mill. He used to come in about 1-2 times a week and he was a really cool guy. Moved to Hawaii for a few years, lived in Spain and then Italy and then came back to our small hometown to work his hard as frick blue collar job. But dang if he didn't love that job and his work buddies. All of a sudden he stopped coming in for like 4 weeks. I didn't think too much of it. People get sick of Subway. It's crappy food. But he finally came in and his arm was covered like he broke it. He was carrying a sheet of steel improperly. Don't ask me the proper way to carry it. That's just what he told me. When a gust of wind hit it and blew it out of his hands. The corner of the sheet cut him bone deep from his elbow to his wrist. He is so lucky he didn't bleed out. He lost 70% of the function in his arm and couldn't work another day as a blue collar worker. To say he was mentally devastated is an understatement. He was in a deep depression for a long time, but he went to his physical therapy and then got a job as a site manager for the same company that he worked for during his accident. This man has forever earned my respect for his tenacity to do what he loves. I watched an Air Force pilot land a C-17 on the wrong runway in Afghanistan. She landed on one that was currently being dismantled and had several dozen workers in the way, including myself. We scattered like roaches as the cargo plane landed. We then watched as she sheepishly exited her aircraft. Within minutes a general ripped a patch off of her flight suit and she put her face in her palms. I heard she never flew again. Scene. No. But my birth mother decided to try H. Got addicted. Quit. And then got married. Wanted H again. Birth dad supplied. Lost 3 kids. Marriage. Nursing job. Everything. Birth dad went to jail over car robbery. Went to rehab. Got clean. Climbed her way out of hole. Was earning nursing license back. Almost got life together. Diagnosed with colon cancer. Died 37 days later. Something to add, I share this for the sake of this message. Choices have consequences, and you never know which are going to be the biggest effect on your life. My mom was 46 years old when she died, and that was when I was 19. Now I am 23 and I often wonder if 1, I am doing the most with my life and 2, what choices I make now will affect me later. Colon cancer does not have a history in my family, so we think the drugs contributed. However, colon cancer rates are going up. Colon cancer is not a joke, it's taking more young people every year. Think about what you are eating. Take care of your bodies, and talk to your doctor if anything sus comes up. I don't want any of you to ever sit in front of a doctor to receive the worst news of your life just to die weeks later with your mother, my grandmother, hoping you'll go faster because they see how much pain you are in your last days. A roller coaster of events. This guy was drunk and decided to leave the party, and not wanting to go the long way home, he decided to walk on the side of the highway. He got hit by a car, and survived but was constantly in pain and couldn't care for himself. This happened about 4 years ago, and his family allowed him to end his life last year. I can't even imagine how hard it was on his parents, allowing their own child to end his life so he wouldn't suffer anymore. My heart breaks every time I think about him. Never personally seen it, but about 10 years ago I've met someone who's paralyzed from the neck down. He was around his 20s, maybe early 30s, when we first met, and he shared the story of how he got paralyzed. Apparently, he was at a party at his friend's house and his friend had a trampoline at his backyard. They were all jumping on it when all of a sudden he landed wrong and got sent to the hospital after. His injury had actually caused his paralysis. I remember all my friends trying to get me to learn to do a backflip on the trampoline. It was innocent fun until I landed on my head. It was one of the worst pains I have felt, but I am thankful to this day that I felt something when I landed. Girl I know went sledding and ran into a tree. She had to relearn to walk, but walking is a generous term for what she is able to do. Probably won't ever be able to walk completely normal again. Sucks because she used to love hiking mountains. My friend who had only ever smoked a little weed tried them just once. Got extremely addicted, went off the rails. Boyfriend left her, lost her job, house, and custody of her kid all within a month. Got arrested trying to break in her ex's house to get her kid. Punched a cop. Had M in her purse. Got sentenced to a mental health ward. She's out and clean now, but the damage is done and it'll probably take years to undo that 1-month drug binge. She went from a good life with a career and house, to living with her parents, working a low-end retail job and having supervised visits with her kid. TLDR, don't do M. My dad was a kind of normal dad for a long time. Made us do chores, complained about lights being on, had the occasional cookout, whatever. Nowhere near a good parent, but he got a solid D+ in parenting, sometimes even a C. He was a pot smoker my entire life, dealt in it, and made a moderate amount of money doing it. After the major growers in our city got busted, though, it got too expensive for him to make any profit. He had dealt with this kind of thing before, got banned from driving in the state of Georgia for it. But this city is pretty small and money was tight to begin with. Started dealing in amphetamines shipped in from nearby cities. I noticed when I was 12 and found box after box of sterilized needles hidden in my parents' closet. My mom lied to me and told me that it was for a diabetic family friend. I believed it for a while. Anyway, after his mom, my grandmother, died, things took a turn for the worse and he went full on M addict. He had just gotten into college to get a degree so he could go back to work. 2. He got divorced, and he lives on the streets. None of us kids talk to him. He's now looking at multiple charges of drug trafficking, illicit drug use, attempted murder, maybe grand theft auto, etc. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.